Hey YouTube, Savon Draws here. Today we're going to be taking a look at Procreate Dreams 2, and we're going to be learning everything in this tutorial from traditional animation to keyframing, and we're also going to learn how to use Procreate Dreams' unique performance mode to create any animations that we want in this application. So without further ado, let's hop into Procreate Dreams and start creating. So when we open Procreate Dreams, we'll see that we're greeted to a home page. And what we can do is we can click the sidebar to manage if we're working on our iPad or on iCloud Drive. So we can store files on only these two locations. We can't store them on external drives. But what you can do is if you want to work on iCloud, you can just come to iCloud, and I know it just has these download icons rather than your regular icons. If you want to work on a previous document, you just click on it and it won't show a progress bar, but it will slowly start to download in the background. And once it's open, it will appear with its thumbnail and you can click on it to open the document. And here my document just finished downloading. Now I can click on it and we see my Procreate Dreams file is working. Now we can go back to our theater. And something else we can do in the theater is we can create folders. So for example, if I wanted to select two of my projects and just click new folder, it will create a new folder and they'll both be added to that new folder. If I want to, I can also drag other projects into those folders, but we can't drag and drop, as you can see. So what you'll have to do is hold with your finger and then click on your folder and drop it in. And there we go. And you can always go back by clicking here. And now we have all of our different folders. Another thing to note with the theater is the Files app. So if we go to the Files app, we'll see that on iCloud Drive, we have two Procreate Dreams folders. And what we need to know here is that Procreate Dreams has a folder just for its projects, and it also has a folder just for brushes. So this is to back up your brushes in iCloud if you choose to opt into that. You don't want to place any Procreate Dreams into your Procreate Dream brush folder. You just want to put them into the Procreate Dreams folder, and this is where you will store all of your projects. Now let's jump back into Procreate Dreams and let's see all of the ways that we can open new projects. Now the easiest way, of course, would just be to click this plus button where we can get a myriad of different options to create a new movie. We can always click Flipbook to jump straight into our animation, or we can click empty to jump into an empty project with nothing in it. And we see that there are a few different templates for sizes that we can choose. You can also change your frames per second and duration before you start your project right here. And now let's cancel so we can actually see how to import Procreate Dreams 1.0 files as well as Procreate files. So right here, I have a Procreate Dreams 1.0 file, and we'll be able to tell because it will have a little 1.0 logo before the actual dream name. And if we click it, it will just automatically update to a Procreate Dreams file. Now, when we go into this project, what we'll see is that it retains the style of animation that we did in Procreate Dreams 1.0, where all of the content was managed on the timeline. However, now we don't use our main timeline to animate. What we would want to do in this situation is we would want to group all of our content frames that are just a bunch of separate drawings, and we would want to multi-select them and turn them into a flipbook by clicking convert to flipbook. And then when we go into our flipbook, we'll see that we can control all of our animation frames for this little headlight. And let's just say that if we wanted to edit one of them, one frame in our flipbook, we could do that, like turn it more transparent on this frame and then bring it back to its regular color here. We can do that now that we've converted it to a flipbook. So that's really how we'll be working in Procreate Dreams 2. We're going to be using flipbooks for our animations, then we're going to come back to our main timeline to edit it as content. So let's jump into a project now and see how we can use Procreate Dreams. I'm going to click empty for the sake of this project, so we won't start off with a flipbook. I'm just going to show us how we can go through the program. So automatically, when we open a new file, we'll see that Procreate Dreams opens up with this blank slate and nothing on the timeline. When you click plus, you can do something called adding a track. Tracks are basically our animation layers in Procreate Dreams. And on our animation layers, we can add things called content, which can be a myriad of different things. They could be flipbooks, which are our animations, drawings, which are just still images, text, or we can also add audio. So we're going to go ahead and add a flipbook. When we add a flipbook, it will take us into this separate mode, but we're going to ignore that for right now. We're going to click flipbook over here in the top left and click finish flipbook to get back to the main timeline. Now what we'll see when we get back to the main timeline is we now have a flipbook on our track. What we can do to zoom in to this flipbook is we can use 3 fingers, left and right. Right will zoom in, left will zoom out, and we'll see the time expands. So now we're only viewing about 1 second of our animation. We can see the timeline marker here. So that's 24 frames, which equals 1 second. We can zoom out like this, and then we can also do those same gestures with our pencil if we bring it up to the numbers at the top and go left or right. Now, if we want to see more of our animation layer vertically, we'll do this gesture and we'll do 3 fingers up or down. Now I'm going to add a circle just for a demonstration in our animation layer. And let's say if we want to zoom into a specific frame when we're really zoomed out, we can double click and it will zoom us into our timeline. And now we can see that frame more clearly. Now this is the first frame, this is the second frame, and we see every frame by frame instead of when we're zoomed out and it groups them together. If we're ever really zoomed in and we want to just see our whole timeline, we can quick pinch with 2 fingers out like that, and it will show us our whole timeline. This can be even better demonstrated with a large project like this one. Let's say I zoom in and I want to zoom all the way out, quick pinch, and I see my whole timeline until this endpoint. And our endpoint just marks an in and out point like a video editing program. It says where we want to stop playing our animation, even if we have animation frames past this marker. So as you can see here, I have animation that goes past here, but if I play, it will stop here and restart my animation. If I were to extend this further just by holding it, I can play my animation for longer at the end. And then I can drag this back. I can also drag this forward if I want my animation to end earlier. And then it will restart. Some other gestures that we can do is that, let's say if we move something and we don't like what we did, we can click 2 fingers to undo and 3 fingers to redo. We can also click these buttons if we have them enabled. We'll find out how to do that later. Now, if we ever want to view our animation in full screen, we can use 4 fingers and click on our screen, and we'll be able to show our whole animation in full screen. When we're done viewing that, we can just click back. If we're ever far on our animation and we just want to play it from the beginning, we can quickly grab the playhead and swing it to the front, and it will automatically play our animation. Before we get into the drawing features, I would like to take a second to thank the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is a platform where people of all skill levels can take self-paced classes to empower their hobby or creative passion. On Skillshare, classes are taught by creative professionals with a variety of topics such as animation, art, graphic design, and more. This month, I did a class relevant to Procreate Dreams called Procreate Dreams: Transform Your Video Content with Animated Transitions. In this class, I learned more about how to incorporate animation into real-life videos. We learned about traditional animation, keyframing, and even colors. What stuck with me the most about this class was the idea of thinking out the animation before you record so you can fully utilize yourself as part of the animation. I also like that the class mentioned to set up your color scheme by eyedropping different parts of your recording so the aesthetic looks pleasing. If you're looking to level up your creative process, you can go to Skillshare now. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Thanks again to Skillshare. Now that we know how to navigate Procreate Dreams 2, why don't we jump into some animation? So I'm going to create another new project and I'm going to click Flipbook this time. So it will send me straight into a flipbook. And I just need to click Edit Flipbook and I'll jump into my Flipbook mode. Now in our Flipbook mode, it works pretty similar to regular Procreate. We have a bunch of our regular tools like brush, erase, lasso, mixing, and drawing layers. So if I draw, I will now be able to open my drawing layers where I can create more layers. Let's say if I were to create a new drawing layer, everything that I do on the new drawing layer would be on top of the previous layer. And then I can also drag and drop it to the bottom if I want to change the layer order. We can edit our layers by hiding them. We can delete them. We can duplicate them. We can change their blending mode. Now this I would need to drag over here so you can see that the blending mode is different. Something we can also do is mask our layers. Now masking, basically how it works is if you draw with the color black, it will erase some of your layer. It will become invisible, right? And you can also do this a little bit more like an eraser. You can have a brush that doesn't erase all of it, just parts of it. And if you go to a white color, instead it will bring all of that information back. So we're not actually erasing when we're masking, we're just hiding something. So I can see my whole drawing layer again. If we want, we can also invert the mask, so it will be the opposite way. Now, how about I take off this mask by clicking Merge Mask, and now we're just back to our regular layer. Something we can also do is clipping masks, where we can just draw on inside of the layer that's below our current layer. And we can't draw outside of the bounds of that. Aside from that, we also have alpha locking, which also just draws inside of the bounds, but it does it on the same layer that you're currently on. And you can always toggle off your alpha lock when you're ready to draw outside of your bounds again. Moving on, we have the mixing brush. Let's say if we have two different colors, we can just click our mixing brush and then we can mix our colors. You can always choose a different brush. There are tons of them. Then we can erase, and this uses all the same settings as our brush. We can also save any sizes that we are drawing at if we're very fond of them. You just need to click on the gray brush toolbar and click plus, and then we can save this drawing size. Let's say if I'm drawing this really small size, I can go back to that large size I was just drawing at by clicking it, and we can do the same thing with opacity. And then we can always remove these points just by clicking them again and clicking minus, and it will remove the point. Right now it's bugging out a little bit, but it works generally. Something new we have in Procreate Dreams 2 is we have destructive transformations. So now we can do things like change our hue, saturation, and brightness on a layer. We have lens blur, Gaussian blur, noise. And we also have sharpen, which I'm not sure exactly what sharpen does. For all of these tools, when you're editing them, you also can click on the screen to undo your changes, or you can also preview the original by clicking preview. You can also click reset to restart it from the beginning. You can click cancel, or you can also make a change and you can hit apply. Moving on, we also have color. So how about we make a new frame and we're just going to draw some circles. And we're going to do it on a few frames just so I can show you how the color fill works. So we have our color panel here, which we can drag down just like in Procreate, and we can move it to any part of our screen. Now I can choose a color in real time, and I can drag from here to color drop. Say if I'm using a more rough looking brush, my color drop may not fill in all the white in between the actual stroke. So what we'd want to do when we color drop is we want to drag to the right or drag to the left so we can basically mitigate all of the extra white space. Now, another thing we can do with the color drop tool is we can click continue filling. And this will allow us to just continue color dropping without having to do this gesture of holding the color drop and dragging it into our drawing. So I can go to my next layer and you'll see that I can just click on it and it will automatically color drop. Pretty neat. I like how it works. Now, something new we have in Procreate Dreams too is we can now select and transform. So we have freehand selections where we can just draw our selection, and you'll see everything that I just drew is my selection. And now I can transform it and move it anywhere. I can distort it. I can change the sizing. I can warp it. I can put on an advanced mesh with my warp to get even more precise distortions. And then I can do freeform warping. Then I can also flip vertical, flip horizontal. I can rotate 45 degrees. And I would also recommend that you always keep your interpolation on nearest neighbor. So when you're making changes, it will basically preserve the best image quality for your drawing. Now let's go back to our original circle. And we see that we also have rectangle selection, ellipse selection, and automatic selection for, let's say, if you want to color something in. And it will just automatically select. And then you could do something like hit color fill here. And while you're still selected in color fill, while you're still in the selection tool, you can change your color in real time. So that's pretty neat. Then you can turn off color fill. Pretty cool. And most importantly, what's hidden here is we also have the Procreate 3-finger down gesture. So if you're transforming, you want to move with 3 fingers downwards on your screen, and then you can cut, you can paste, and you don't even need to be in transform all the time to use this gesture. It will just always give you these copy and paste options whenever you use the 3-finger down gesture. So we could do something like duplicate this. We could copy and paste. And yeah, just use all of those options. Now, unfortunately, we don't have quicklime like in Procreate yet. They say that's coming in the next update, but we cannot just draw a line and expect it to turn into a perfect shape. It will just be the shape that we drew already. Now that we're done checking out all of our tools, we can finally check out our settings. So for our settings, first we can insert a photo, or we can insert a file, which is also just inserting a photo, but it will be from the Files app. Then we have our canvas, and canvas is important just for the data that we're using in our Procreate Dreams files. So if we go to crop and resize, we'll see that we get this white box that we can crop and resize. And this is basically just the full size of our flipbook. So this gray area, this gray square that we see, is the actual canvas that we're going to see when we preview our animation. If we were to go back to our main stage, we'll see that we only see what was inside of that gray box, but we can draw the whole way until the end of this white box in our flipbook. So now we don't have our infinite canvas any longer, but we do still have the ability to draw outside of our canvas. So we can also crop and resize our flipbook if we don't need all of that space. It will save us some data. Another way you can also save space on your files is you can click settings and you can click resample, and then you can lower the image quality of your drawings. So let's see, if I were to go down here and let's say set it to 10%, it would get really blurry. If I set it to 1%, it gets extremely blurry because it's basically making it a lower resolution right here. Something we also have with the select tool is we can see a selection max visibility. And basically, if we move this up, it will highlight what we currently are selecting while we're on the select tool. I usually like to keep this low so I can see the rest of my drawing as I'm moving my selections. Something new we also have is the ability to toggle off keyframe effects on our drawings. So for example, I have this project where I have on keyframe effects, and it's just basically changing the color of the ball every frame. If I go into my flipbook, I can toggle off keyframe effects, which is what you see right now, where you can see that the ball was fully animated with a blue color. But if I toggle back on keyframe effects, I can see that the ball will start to change color every frame because I added those effects outside of my flipbook on the main timeline. You can see that if you go to keyframes, I added a keyframe color effect. Next up, we have onion skinning, and we can toggle our onion skinning visibility on and off just by clicking right here. And we'll see that we can see several frames behind or in front of us. We can turn up the opacity so we see more of our previous frame, and we can also do the same for our forwards frames. And we can also choose how many frames we want to see going forward. So right now I have it set up to 7. We can see the max is 8 and the lowest is 1. We can set a color tint so it will be the same color that we set down here, but we can also turn this color tint off and it will show us the original drawing color that we made it in. I prefer to keep color tint on generally so it can differentiate from the current frame that I'm on. We can also choose to blend the current frame that we're on with our selected color. I generally don't do this, but it's something you can do if it's your preference. And finally, we have our preferences. So first and foremost, most importantly, you can move your brush toolbar to the left or right. So this would be very helpful if I were like drawing with my right hand and I want to change my brush size really quickly with my finger. Then we can set our pressure, our smoothing. We also have cursor settings. So we can choose to see a brush cursor. As you can see, I'm seeing this little dot as I'm hovering over the screen. But I can also turn that off. And then I can only see my drawing like this. If I turn on advanced cursor settings, I can see my brush cursor while I'm hovering, while I'm painting, or I can see my cursor while I'm hovering and painting. So that would look like I'm hovering now and I'm painting and I still see that little black line. And we can choose to see our active color as well if we want to see the color we're coloring with, which would be blue in this case, and we no longer have that black outline. Then we have dynamic brush scaling, which I recommend that you leave on. This will basically preserve the quality of your strokes no matter how zoomed in or out you are. Then you can also choose to store brushes in iCloud. This feature is very neat so you don't lose your brushes, but I personally don't like it because I find that you need to re-download your brushes every time you come into Procreate Dreams. And it's really not handy if you're trying to use Procreate Dreams and you don't have an internet connection. So I honestly would leave this off after you back up your brushes in iCloud. And then also you can enable painting with your finger if you want to as well. I generally don't do this because I have to do all of my drawing with the pencil because I'm trying to be precise. Now we're going to undo that. If you want to do that as well, we're going to cancel. Now let's get into some animation stuff finally. So what we'll see with our flipbooks when we create new flipbooks is we have this single track. And you can just draw here and it will automatically create something for you. Then we can just go to our new frame and draw, and it will automatically show us our onion skinning. We can also click plus if we just want to add a new frame after our current one. Now let's say we want to make these last for a longer duration of time. We can click the multi-select tool here, and then we can draw over these frames, and we can click them, and now we can just drag them out like this, and now they all have a duration of 3 frames. The initial frame will be in white, and then these 2 gray out frames will show that it's a longer duration for the frame. And now the animation plays slower. Now let's say we want to make an in-between between these animations. We can go on one of our grayed out frames that shows the longer duration, and we can click plus, and it will basically eat the frame that you were already on and you can now create your in-between between these 2 frames on the onion skin. And now let's set these both back to 3 frames just by clicking and dragging out. And now we have our in-between. Pretty cool. Another way you can create an in-between is by holding and clicking insert frame. And then rather than eating the frame that you're already on, it will create a frame after, and then you can draw there. We'll draw our in-between and we'll set this 3 frames. Now something else we can do for frame management is we can do something called free trim. So when we hold a frame and then we move it, it will initiate something called free trim at the top, and we can just move our frames and it will get rid of all of the extra duration or add more duration to our frames. When you do this on frames like this, you can bring them down, give more space to the other frames. Now, if we want to create a new animation layer and add some extra stuff, we just click here, and then we can have 2 things moving at a different timing. For the sake of differentiating it, I'll put a different color, and I'll make a box rolling. And this won't be the prettiest box. It's just to show that we can have different timing. And I'll just put these 4 frames, and I'll extend this to the end. Oop, I extended it way too far. And now we have 2 things moving with different timings. And you'll also notice that as we create new animation layers, we just keep having less space on the bottom of our screen. So once you have 3 tracks, it won't take up any more space than that, even when you create more animation layers. You'll just have to move up and down to see your animation layers in your flipbook. You can delete layers by going to track options and click delete track. This is also where you'll find all of your track options like opacity, highlight, blending mode, masking, and then you can do all of these options as well. So let's say if I were to do track options and I lower the opacity, we'll see that now my square has a lower opacity for the whole animation layer. I can also change my frame duration here. Something that's nice is, let's say if I separate my animations like this, I can click fill duration and it will fill up to the next frame. It will fill up all the empty frames in between. I can also click split content on any frame. So now I can have the same drawing, but it will be a different frame. So I can draw here and we'll see that this is the original one and this is the split frame. Now, multi-select, when we're working with multiple layers, we can, instead of just drawing like this, we can also circle and it will select everything. But we can see if we try to draw to the left, it won't scroll to the left of our timeline. So if we want to grab keyframes over here, we're going to want to scroll over and just select them. Now, something that's important to mention is you can have a longer duration in your flipbook than what is allowed on the timeline, and it won't show. Now, what I mean by this is, let's say if I push all of these frames out on this first frame, now we lost the 3 frames that were here previously. But if I go to my flipbook and I extend the beginning, I get these 3 frames back. And we'll see when I go into my flipbook, when I go down, I have all the frames back on my first frame. So sometimes you might push your content out of the group because flipbooks are controlled in groups on the main timeline. So if I were to trim this, I may start at a point where I see a totally different part of my timeline, which is deeper into my animation. So you always want to make sure that you have the right amount of time set on your flipbook group on the main timeline. Now, something we can also do is we can clear our frames and it will just leave an empty space where our frame is. Something we can do with empty frames is we can click remove empty section and it will just make your frame go back to the nearest frame before it. So let's say if we cleared this frame and we clicked remove empty section, it would go all the way over here. We can also remove a single frame instead of removing the whole section at any time. We can copy, paste, duplicate, or cut our frames as well. And then we can also copy tracks as a whole. We can go to track options and we can duplicate. And now we have 2 tracks with the same animations on them. Unfortunately, we can't merge our animation layers yet, but hopefully that's coming soon. Now that's about all you need to know for navigating animation. Now how about we actually create an animation in our own flipbook? Now this part of the tutorial I hope will be a little bit more clarifying on the power of Procreate Dreams 2 than other tutorials. So we're going to try and create the same animation in 2 different ways on our flipbook. So what we're going to do is first we're going to do a hand-drawn way, and then we're going to do a keyframe way. So we're going to start drawing, just choose a brush, and we're just going to animate a ball bouncing. On my first animation layer, I'm going to draw a little background. I'm just going to choose a gray color, and I'm going to scribble in a little plane that the ball can bounce on. And we're going to extend this frame to the end of our flipbook group. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new animation layer. And we're going to change to black. We're going to create a little chart so we can see where our ball will be bouncing on different frames. So we don't need to actually think about it. It's going to start really high up here because it's going to come into the camera. And then it's going to drop really fast. It's going to come down here, and then this will be where it hits the ground. And then we're going to make this a little bit more transparent. And on the way back up, the ball will come here. And then it's going to pop up pretty high. And then it's going to slow down in the air up here. And then it will go back down. So let's also extend this animation layer a few frames. And let's create our new animation layer and finally animate our ball. So as I said, we're going to start on frame 4, and our ball is going to come down flying right here. And then it's going to go here. Then here. And at the bottom, we're going to squash the ball. So it will become very horizontal. And then on the way back, we're going to stretch it upwards like it hit the ground. And you're just going to see we're going to match it, try and match it up with this line. Then it's going to come out here. It's going to get back some of its circular shape. And it's going to be in its regular circle form here. And then it's going to come all the way up here to the top, matching with this. And then to go back down, we'll just wing it. We're going to use these same lines. So let's have it come matching up with this line. And then we're going to match it up with this line, this transparent one. And then we're going to drop down really fast. And then it will hit the ground again. Now here I'm going to split this content and I'm going to delete this frame. And we're actually going to have the ball fly to the side this time. So we're going to create a little arc and it's going to pop up really fast about here. Then it's going to keep moving fast here and still be moving fast. Then it's going to hit the ground. And then we're going to go over here a little bit more. And then it's just going to stay on the ground and roll. So let's click our track options and actually make this more transparent, the chart. And we're going to have our ball come up here. Oh, and I need to extend this as well. Now we're going to have our ball come up here. And then it will be here. And here. And then it will squash a little bit. And it will retain most of its shape. It's going to be a little ovular here. And then it's going to be a circle here. Circle here. And then we're just going to hit the ground and we're going to keep rolling. And for this, I'll actually ignore this part here. We're just going to roll it really close for a few frames. So we're just going to keep drawing a new circle for each of these frames. And now how about we play our animation? And we can see that that's way too fast. So let's hide this chart. Oh, and I see there's actually an issue. I put 2 frames on the same animation frame. So we're going to erase this on this frame and erase this on this frame. And since our animation was too fast, we're going to select everything. And we're going to put it on 2s and see how it plays out. That's much better. Now let's add just a little bit of effects. So when it pops up, we're going to have a little effect on the ground to make the ground feel like it's real. I'm just going to have those particles pop up. Let's play that. Then let's do one for the second drop. And we're just going to make a little trail following the ball. And we're going to hit the ground one more time. Now we can color our animation as well using the same technique we said earlier. Now I want to have my colors on a different layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click track options and I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to color on the bottom layer. So I'm going to use red and then I'm just going to click continue filling and I'm just going to keep filling in every frame. And now that that's done, we have our colored ball. Pretty neat. Now, I want it to just show this part of the animation, so I'm going to drag this endpoint of the whole animation, and I'm going to end it here. I'm also going to end my flipbook here as well. Now, if we go to timeline and go to loop, we can loop our animation. If we want, we can also click ping pong to show our animation and then play it in reverse. Or we can click one shot just to play it all at once, like I've been doing the whole time. Oh, doesn't seem to be working either. There's still quite a few bugs. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try and recreate this animation using the perform features in Procreate Dreams. So we're going to create a new flipbook and we're going to create our blue ball. And for this one, we can just draw everything on one layer. And I'm going to give it a smiley face. And we're going to go out of our flipbook. Oh, and quick tip. If you ever want to jump out of flipbook mode quicker than the animation, just double tap flipbook. And you don't need to click finish drawing. So now we're going to shrink this. And we're going to move our ball up here. Now we're going to go to performance mode. And performance mode will allow us to basically just create our animation by moving our character. So let's say if I hide this. Oh, and I actually need to extend the drawing in my flipbook. Now, if I go to perform mode, beginning of our timeline, and we can just do this, and it will move our character the same way I just did it. It's trying to smooth my animation out because my motion filtering is set up here. But if I set it back down, it will show more of the raw animation I tried to do just like that. So I'm going to undo that and we're going to try and create the same animation with our ball. So usually when you're performing, you want to make sure that you can immediately do the movement you want to do. So we're going to want to make sure that we go down, then we're going to jump up, down again, and then we're going to go roll to the side. So let's do it. Down, up, down, side. I didn't like that one. So I'm going to redo it. Down, up, down, side. And now we have this. And I want, when it goes to the side, for it to also bounce up. So we're going to choose our lowest frame when the ball hits the ground. And we're going to move it like this. Nice. So now with our keyframes, we just need to keep our most high keyframe and our lowest keyframe because we just need the top and bottom points. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to keyframe mode and we're going to multi-select And we're going to delete all these keyframes between the highest point and the lowest point where the ball drops onto the ground. So the ball drops onto the ground, and this frame, this is the lowest point. So let's grab all of these keyframes and let's delete those keyframes. And now you'll see he just drops straight onto the ground and pops up. That's what we want. Now, after he pops up, we also want to do the same thing and get the highest point and delete all the keyframes between that last point where he hit the ground. So we're going to grab these and we're going to delete those keyframes. Now we have down, up. Now let's do it again for the next one where he goes down and up. Where's our lowest keyframe? It's right here. And we're going to just grab all of these in between and delete them. And the next keyframe after he hits the ground that we want will be when he pops up. So we're also going to delete any keyframes in between that. So he starts to pop up here. And instead we'll actually just go for our highest point in his jump. So this would be the highest point in the middle of his jump. And we're going to get rid of these keyframes. And then we're going to find the last point where he hits the ground again. And delete the keyframes there. Now let's play everything. And it seems I removed one of the keyframes where he was actually going back up by accident. So I'm just going to perform that again. And we end up with this. Now we can move the timing of our keyframes to get a better time for the bouncing. So we're going to move. I like the first bounce. We can move it a little bit to the left. And then we're going to move this point where he gets into the air way closer. And what we can do also is we'll click expand, move, and scale. And then we can see how our character is moving up and down. So the Y keyframes will represent our up and down keyframes, and the X keyframes will represent left to right. So we want the character to move up and down and make it smoother. So what we're going to do is something called easing. So for our first keyframe, we're going to want to set our easing to ease in. And ease in will basically start off our ball slow, and then the movement for up and down will become faster towards the end. On our second one, we want it to ease out, which will start off the animation fast, and then it will become slow at the top, because we want it to be slow when the ball is going to reach its maximum height in the air. So we're going to set our easing to ease out. And then we're also going to set our easing to ease in the air when we're coming back down. And we're going to move this to the left a little bit so we get a faster drop. And we want to line up our X keyframe when he starts moving to the right, because he bounces. We want to match it up with our Y keyframe because he's supposed to start moving like this all at the same time. And for our X keyframe, we actually only need 2 keyframes for this. So we can delete all these keyframes in between because he's just moving left to right, while the Y is changing because he's going up and then he's going back down here. So for both of these keyframes, we're going to set our easing to ease out. And we're actually going to drag these keyframes a little bit closer so it doesn't make a weird effect towards the end. And we're going to move the Y a little bit earlier. And we'll set this Y keyframe to ease out. And I think I'm actually going to set the X to linear instead. So he's just moving the same spacing on the X every frame. Now when our ball hits the ground, I want it to start rolling. So what we can do is we can go back to our perform mode, and when we see this gray little bar outside of our red selection bar, we can use that to rotate. So I'm going to just perform a rotation. But first, I'm going to extend my animation just a little bit further so I can rotate. I'm going to get out of my flipbook, and we're going to go to the point where the keyframes end and it hits the ground. And from here, we'll rotate. And now I want him to move as we rotate as well. So I'm going to move the ball like that. And once again, we're going to get rid of the keyframes we don't want. And I'm going to set this easing to ease in. Now we're going to go down to our rotation keyframes and spread those apart a little bit. So we're going to want it to start rotating the second he hits the ground. So about here, and we're going to move our keyframes all over to this side. Now, what we can do to add some stretch to our character is we can do two things. We can go to Edit Flipbook, and on the frames where he hits the ground, we can click Split Content, and we're going to split it where he hits the ground, and then we're going to split it again after so it can return back to its regular size. Then we're going to transform the circle. We're going to click Distort, and we're going to squash it. Then we can do this on the same way. When he's coming back up, we can split the content again. And then on this frame, we're going to stretch our ball. Then we're going to come down, and as he gains speed, we're going to stretch him. And we're going to squash him. And I'm going to split the content. And for this one, I think we'll warp him. I'm going to take off the advanced mesh. And I'm going to warp him again on this one. Ball is going to bounce all the way here. And then when he hits the ground, he'll start rolling. Now let's play that. Now it looks much more bouncy. Now let's compare the two animations. We have our original flipbook, which is quite a bit more choppy, but it has some more animation effects going on. And then we have this smoother animation that we performed and used keyframes to edit. Now there's a few cool things we can do to spice an animation like this up after we finish it. So I'm going to jump to another file that I created that's very similar so we can see things that we can do to finish up and tune an animation in Procreate Dreams. Now we can add effects. So what are some effects we can add? To do the effects, we're going to go to Keyframe Mode and we're going to look for a keyframe we want to add effects on. So first off, let's start maybe just doing colors. So I'm going to collapse all these keyframes. I'm going to add a color effect. And sometimes also don't forget that you can use this in portrait mode. And I find it much easier to look at the effects on the screen when you use this app in portrait mode. I won't do it for the tutorial, but it's much easier to manage. But we'll go back to horizontal mode. And I'll drag my timeline down so it doesn't get in the way of me seeing the animation. I'm going to click filter, and then I'm going to click HSB, which is going to be our saturation and brightness as well as hue. And then I can change the color. Now we can also use keyframes when we're doing effects like changing color. And I'm going to drag this so the animation ends here as well. So now we just see this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it gradually switch to, I'm going to make another keyframe for HSB. And I'm going to gradually make the color switch to, let's say, purple. And then at the end, I think I want it to be yellow. You want to make sure that you can see what you're working with. So you know that everything's going through properly while you're adding the effects. And now we have a bunch of a color changing bowl for our animation. Something else we could do is, let's say when it's dropping, if we want to make it seem more dynamic, we could do an effect like blurring. So I'm going to click gauge and blur, and then I'm going to add a blur right here. Now you'll see that it made the rest of my animation blurry, and that's because it starts off regular and then I added a blur keyframe. You also need to take off the keyframe for your effects. So after I do the blur, I'm going to set it back to 0 so it stops being blurry. And we also see that the normal goes to blurry over time because it's a keyframe. So we're going to want to copy our keyframe with 0 blur and place it right before our keyframe with a blur. Now, if we want that same effect later in our animation, we can copy all 3 of these, which is no blur to blur, and then go back to not being blurred, and we can post it on the second drop. And let me just move this because I didn't put it exactly in the right position. And here we have our repeatable effects. Now, what makes this so cool working in groups is we can just duplicate this whole thing, this whole animation, and we can place that same animation playing somewhere else. And we can add different effects to this one if we want as well. And then we can duplicate it, and let's say, why don't we make it bigger? And then we duplicate it, and let's make it smaller. And just like that, we have a pretty cool animation where everything has effects. And now that we have all of this craziness, let's make it even crazier. Let's shorten our timeline, and now let's group these. And now we look a little bit more organized on our timeline, and we still have all of these within a group. So now, why don't we duplicate this group and make it even crazier? And we'll put this group, which is the same thing, we'll flip it upside down, and let's rotate it and then skew it to the left. And now let's make it a reflection. So let's lower the opacity on this group. And now it looks like a reflection for all those other animations. And let's slow it down. Let's put the FPS to 12 so it's more apparent. So yeah, with grouping and just editing effects in this program, you can do a lot of craziness that makes your animations look really cool. And now that these are all in a group, why don't I make it a little bit more unique? I can create a new flipbook and I can make it a clipping mask. So now I can just draw over this frame, any of these frames, because they're all in a group together. So it treats them all as one animation layer. So why don't I make this one evil? And I can make this one reacting to it. Now, anytime it goes into that space, the clipping mask will show that evil face. And then I'll hide the big guy on this layer, this big one, because it doesn't really need a reflection. All right, so a few quick things I didn't go over in this tutorial. Real quick, if you ever want to animate over footage, I really recommend that you import your footage right here. You can hold to click separate audio and video, which is one thing that's important. I also recommend that you set your project size to 1920 by 1080. When I was working in 4K with video footage, I got a lot of bugs and crashing, and I missed a lot of the saving that was supposed to happen when my application crashed. Aside from that, keep in mind you can turn your videos into flipbooks. So you would want to maybe duplicate your original video file after you size it in Procreate Dreams, and then you can convert it to a flipbook, and then you can just animate directly on top of your video with a different animation layer inside of the same flipbook. And it will basically organize the time of your video together with the time of your animation. So you just want to wait for it to apply crop. Depending on how large your video is, it may take a little while. And then you just want to draw on top of that. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of animation layers. And then at the bottom, I have my video playing in the flipbook. And it has the same timing as everything in my animation layers. I can change the duration of different frames. Pretty neat. And then if I wanted to edit a specific frame of my video, I can use all the same tools that I can use on my drawings on my video here. For example, I can warp my video. I can select different parts of it if I want to make my head pop out. So yeah, just keep in mind that you can edit videos much better in Procreate Dreams too. Another thing is that you can also create camera movement in Procreate Dreams too. When you're done with your whole animation, you can select your whole animation, everything, and group them together. And from there, you can use keyframes or performance to add camera movement. So let's say maybe I can move this animation left to right. So once I group everything together, I'm just going to move my animation, and we'll see now we get camera movement for this whole animation. Now, if you want, you could also keyframe this more manually. You could go into Keyframe Mode. You could click Move and Scale, and then we will have a move and scale on this first frame, and then we can add one here just by tapping. And then if we want, we can manually enter how far we want it to go. So I'll put translate X, which will move it on the left and right. And then I'll add 400 and click enter. And now it's going from translate X to 0 to translate X 400. And the camera movement will make it go to the right. And finally, I didn't go over drawing layers. And drawing layers are essentially just like regular drawing like Procreate. So you have all the same tools that you have in Flipbook mode. You just can't animate. So you don't have a flipbook at the bottom of your screen. Drawing layers are really good for just static images. For example, in my drawing layer here, all my background images are just still images in a drawing layer rather than a flipbook. If you want to add a drawing layer, all you have to do is click plus and click drawing. You can also color code your groups. So if you hold your group and you click highlight, you can select a color label for it, and then on the timeline, you'll get that color. As you can see, I have a very color-coded animation here for organization. You can also name your layers by holding them and clicking rename. If you like to tinker around other people's files so you can learn, you can pick up my file Into the Dungeon, which shows a bunch of advanced and intermediate techniques in Procreate Dreams 2, such as masking, camera work, drawing layers, and I'll also add text in every layer so you can understand exactly what's going on. And there's also a lot of post effects in this file as well. So there's a lot of things to comb through in this file, despite it only being 5 seconds. You can pick this file up for free on Gumroad, or you can get the full version for $1, which has all the original files and layers that are in there. If you would like to learn even more about Procreate Dreams 2, you can join my Discord server in the comments and ask some questions. I can help, and there are also other people in the community who can give you answers. I appreciate if you watched this far. Don't forget to like and hit subscribe if you really got something from this video. A comment always helps as well. Thank you.